for joining the journey from idea to scale. Please welcome Insight Senior Manager of Intelligence Apps, Amol Ajgaonkar, and Insight Chief Architect, Juan Orlandini.
Well, hello everybody, and thanks for joining. Welcome to our session where we take you through the journey from the beginnings of a project and accelerating it all the way to scale. So before we get started, what we wanted to do is level set what we're really talking about. And there's really two architectures that you have to worry about. There's a core architecture. That's the stuff that you run either in a private data center, in a public cloud, or in a hybrid model. And you do have to worry about that because that's where the brains, that's the long-term lived data lives. That's where you probably extract more value in the long term. And we'll discuss a little bit of that. And then there's the edge itself. And as you can see in this diagram, the edge can be in a lot of different places. It could be in a factory, an oil rig, in another building. It could be a farm. There's lots of different places. But the journey is actually very, very similar regardless of what the edge is. You just have to be very careful about what you do. And we have some case studies that might illustrate some of that for you so that as you're going through this journey, you can take from those examples and see that regardless of what you're doing, it's a very similar experience.
Right, and just to add to it, Juan, and let me know if you don't agree with this, but the core that you see, the core can be anywhere, right? It could be in the data center, it could be on-prem somewhere, or it could be in the cloud, right? But the journey, the pattern still remains the same, which is great from a scalability point of view as well.
Yeah, and it is. I agree with you 100%. And in fact, that's actually one of the decision points that as an organization, you need to make, whether you want to leverage the power of the cloud, because the cloud does bring a significant amount of innovation capabilities that you don't have to develop on your own. But if you decide because of a regulatory compliance or data sovereignty or whatever the rules are that drive you towards this, the private data center needs to be built, you can absolutely do that. And there's fantastic partnerships and products out there that can help you do that regardless of what your decision and your business case is for that.
Awesome. So let's jump into a case study, right? Or a couple of them. And let's start with maybe a smaller one. The one I think Juan and I both like and love.
Beer. Could you not like beer?
Exactly. So we were working with a small brewery, and because of the pandemic, they had to scale it down, right? They wanted to make sure that their patrons were safe. And so what we did was essentially we approached them with a solution, right? They wanted to make sure, like I said, the patrons were safe. How would they do that to ensure that nobody came in with a high temperature? And if someone did, then they had their own policies on how they would actually address that. So we understood what the problem statement was, right? We always try to get the business outcome. And the outcome here was they want to keep the business open, but they want to do it safely and responsibly. So once we understood what that business outcome was, we put forward a couple of options. And one of them was, let's put in a thermal camera in place and let's measure the temperature of the patrons coming in. We don't need to identify who they are, right? But we just need to know that everybody who is walking in has a normal temperature range and nobody has elevated temperatures. So as part of the discovery, we understood what they wanted to do, right? What the outcomes were, what the scale was, where would we actually keep or place the camera? Where would we have an edge device? What type of insights would they want? Like who needs to be alerted, right? Somebody needs to be alerted if the camera detects an elevated temperature. What are we going to do, right? So it gave them a nice place to define that process for themselves as a brewery, as a business. What actions should we take? How should we take those actions as well? And so once we are done with the discovery and we've planned, we could actually go in and deploy the camera, the edge devices, and what type of cameras as well, right? Do we need a single detection? Do we need to do multi-detection of all the people who are in the frame? And then what would the flow be of the people as well, right? It's a business. We need to understand that, okay, people will enter from this entrance, people will exit from that entrance. Where would they be seated? What are the chances that people could, try and walk into the exit door and not the entrance door? So all of those questions came in. But going through that discovery process were extremely important to be able to plan for all of this, and that really drives the success of any solution. So once we had the calibration box and we had the thermal camera in place, we planned it. So here you can see on the screen, we actually took a blueprint and said, okay, this is where your sensors will go, this is where the camera will go, and so on and so forth. Um, this is what the camera looks like, right? So the installation, I think the next slide has that. So here you can see it was detecting people and their temperatures and how far they are, and we could actually define the area that we want that detection to happen. So we don't try and pick up people that are far away within the frame, but only the people who are close by, right? And once we had that in place, they started to get alerts like these, right? So this is not a real alert, but they started to get alerts like this one to say, if you've got an elevated temperature, this is what it looked like. They could manage all of their devices on place. And this is important for any edge solution, to be able to understand where your devices are located, what are they doing right now, are they up or down, right? You need to be able to manage those devices. So having the ability to be able to see those devices, to be able to see the state of those devices across all your locations is super important in an edge solution. Here are some of the other experiences that we have built for that customer, because it was important to them, for them to understand exactly what's happening, how many accurate scans were done, uh, you know uh, how many elevated temperatures were detected in the last 14 days, average scans per day, and so on and so forth. But it also gave them an idea on how many people were coming in. Right now, you're using one technology that you've already deployed, and you're using that technology to drive understanding of your business as well, right? You can see that was a really great weekend, and so you understand your peaks and your valleys in terms of your business, your customer flow as well, right? So you can plan accordingly. So though it is used for um, temperature scanning and making sure people are safe and you're running your business responsibly in a pandemic, it also adds value to just running your operationalization of your business as well. To give you a high level architecture what that looked like, it's actually pretty straightforward. You had your thermal cameras, you had your temperature sensors, you had your soap dispensers, and then you had an edge device, a gateway, that was analyzing all of this data, and then providing you the insights through a mobile app. As easy as that. And so as you stamp out the same architecture across multiple locations, your applications doesn't have to change, right? Your application remains the same. It can handle multiple locations. And now you can click on any location and see how that location is doing. Um, so all in all, I think if you think of this as a small scale story, from envisioning to delivery and support, and being able to solve a business problem, whether it's small or big, I think it's a great pattern that is already in place. And as Juan will talk about a bigger story, you'll realize that it's the same pattern. And as we go through that, the another story, it's going to be the same. So doing this in a repeatable fashion helps us help the customer get to a production state quickly, and consistently, right? Delivering quality consistently across different scaled solutions.
And you know what I like about that, Amal, is that, and you flew by that a little bit, is that we really looked at five things. It's the people that are going to be affected, the things that are going to be affected, what insights we're looking for, the places that we want to go deploy this stuff. And in this case, it was only one, right?
Mhm.
And then what needs to be done with that data. And in that case, it was two things, actually. One is to notify you, hey, oh my gosh, there's somebody that's got high temperature. Let's go intervene. And then the second one is to capture that data for additional business value. And that's actually one of those things that we find as a common pattern that happens over and over and over again, is you deploy it for one thing, but you then discover that you have much more valuable data that's coming out of it that can help you with your business. So that's great. So let me step into the next example. And this is similar, right? And sticking with the COVID theme, this is one of our clients, is Harris Teeter, which, if you're not familiar with, they're a grocer, retail grocer. They have about 260 stores, primarily in the East Coast, and they were running into a problem where they were paying a nursing organization $50,000 a month for each one of its 5 distribution centers to go measure by hand the temperature of their employees coming into it. And we did a proof of study. It was the same thing, people, things, insights. And it was relatively simple, 5 places, but same kind of a thing, thermal camera. And what came out of it is that we started measuring the temperature much faster. The proof of concept actually paid for itself very quickly and validated that we could do this at a larger scale across 5 locations. And they started seeing that, hey, we were doing much more rapid scans. Our employees are happier because we don't have to stop them. It feels much more natural. So, trying to keep things natural, and very, very rapid response time. And it was a great and successful story. Same pattern, larger story.
Absolutely, Juan. And it's not even the same pattern of engagement. It's essentially, if you look at the core features of any edge solution are, device management. You want to manage your alerts, you want to manage your locations. All of those remain the same across all use cases. When you come from, if you want to build an intelligent edge solution, those are the core features that don't change. What changes is what business outcome you want and where does it fit, right? So you should be focused on, okay, I need this business outcome. Everything else is going to be the same. And so when we build our solutions, that is what we keep in mind, is what is the commonality across all the solutions, and we build that so that we don't have to build it again and again for our customers, right? They need to be able to leverage that expertise and that IP from us, be able to scale it out and get to production quickly. I have another one, and I think this goes to show from a scale point of view. You talked about multi-site, right?
Right.
This is multinational, so when you're going across nations, it adds a little bit of complexity there,
Yeah,
right?
it gets messier for sure.
And so this is essentially, piggybacking on the pandemic use cases. This one was for contact tracing. Now, when we talk about contact tracing, everybody's ears perk up because now we like, hey, what information are you collecting, right? Are you tracking me now? But that's not the case with the sensors, and those sensors are have a unique ID, right? So when we are looking at trying to understand if there was a person who was detected positive, then we want to make sure that people who were in touch with that person need to know, like, hey, maybe I should get tested, right? And that one feature of being able to say who, without saying who was positive, just being able to tell the other people, like, hey, maybe you should go test yourself, right? Maybe you've been exposed to the virus, and that helps the businesses actually, come up and start back up and bring some sort of normalcy to this crazy year. um, so with having these sensors in place and being able to log the contact events, and then whenever certain context events happen, understanding where they happened, the duration, and being able to decide what that duration is, right? You should be able to configure that duration, because it always duration and the distance itself, because the guidance changed as people understood more about the virus. The guidance changed, whether it's 6 feet or 10 feet, or you need to be, so far away, and you need to be 6 feet, but you have to be, standing within proximity for X amount of minutes or whatnot, right? So it was being able to configure that and then being able to deploy this across nations, um, so that they get one view, a single pane of glass, to look at their entire deployment and see, okay, what cases am I getting, who tested positive, and if somebody tested positive, then can I actually then go and track um, who that person was, and then be able to track which people actually met with that person, and then let them know, right? But again, this data is sensitive, so being able to put the authentication and authorization around it, and then allowing only the authorized users, whether it's in HR or legal, be able to access that information, and then be able to say, okay, this person was tested positive, and this person met X amount of people in this day in this location for this much amount of time, and then all they get to see are IDs, right? So the HR team can then go and say, okay, who was this ID assigned to, and then be able to let them know. Um, Notify them like, hey, maybe you should go test or quarantine yourself, or whatever their policy is, right? It changes from company to company, but then they have that information to make those decisions.
Well, you know
uh,
what? This smacks of Big Brother, right? As you think about it, right? Is that you're watching your employees. So one of the things that you, Amal, I know you were very much part of this project that you guys were very careful about, is making sure that this was not seen as a invasion of privacy, right? Number one, that it wasn't tracking you around home, so you had to
mhm,
do some of that stuff. And you also had to make sure that the devices themselves were monitored, because I mean it's possible that they were running out of battery. All these things have a battery, right?
yeah,
And making sure that all that stuff and the device provisioning stuff itself. So there's details inside of this stuff that we had to worry about, but
mhm.
the pattern remains the same. Is I think the message that we're trying to come
Yeah,
across.
absolutely. I mean, the pattern remains the same, but then when it comes to data, some of these nuances for a larger scale solution come into play. You do have to consider different countries, rules and regulations, and where that data lives, and whether that it can move across, boundaries, or it cannot, and where it stays. All of that has to be taken into consideration. But that is, again, to your point, Juan, it's the common pattern, right? You go back into discovery and say, okay, what are my constraints? Where should the data live? What are your constraints as a business? What are your regulation? What are your policies? And bring those out to the table, and then be able to build a solution around those, so it works for you, right? It works for the customer. um, to Again, this I think highlights what we were talking about, is the minimum trust required from employees, right? They don't need a phone. There's no personal information that's just laying out there. It's securely stored. It only tracks people, in the sense it's not tracking people as they walk around. It's only tracking when you get in proximity of another person, and it's only at the workplace, and stuff like that. So it
You know
becomes.
what I like about this one? I'm sorry, Amal.
Oh, go ahead.
Is a little bit of the I'm a nerdy technology guy, as you can probably see from my office over here. Is the wireless technology that was associated with this one in particular? So it used LoRaWAN, so you could have a widespread coverage of a very large facility, right? There's some facility planning that you have to do associated with that. Make sure that you have all of the right coverage in the right places, and the density in certain places need higher density devices than in others. You also might need location beacons to make sure that you have the right location tracking without the need of a GPS, right? Again, there's the fear of Big Brother watching, right? And what was actually interesting about this exercise over here is that as we worked with this client, we found out that some of the folks that were using these devices had them on a lanyard, but that lanyard became a safety hazard because it was in a factory place where you might have machinery where that lanyard is probably not a good idea. So we ended up having to figure out how to put together this device in a different configuration. So it was a wearable device that was in compliance with the safety regulations for the workplace that they were in. So lots of learnings that you can do, but again, it's, you got to make sure that you understand all the business context for all the sensors that you're using.
Absolutely. And so let's take a look at the deployment timeline here, right? So what does a typical timeline look like for something like this, where either there is already an existing IP and we've just, we know what devices we want and we know how it's going to get deployed. It's pretty straightforward. It's, you like the preparation and alignment, again, alignment, discovery. It's essentially trying to understand where are we going to deploy, doing some site surveys, getting the hardware, configuring the hardware, setting up the solution for you, and then go ahead and deploy, right? So, for this one, it was, 1 week for phase one. Phase two was around 2 weeks, and then initial post deployment support, right? Support is absolutely important in this, because once you have this deployed, when any solution basically goes out in production, you need support because something will go wrong. It's hardware, it's software. There might be a bug. Somebody might drop a hardware device. It might need a fix or a replacement. All of those comes forward, right? So you have to take care of that part. If you look at the employee, like the variable itself, like Juan mentioned, there were different form factors, right? You had the variable, you had the lanyard, and there was another one, I think it was a wristband or armband or something like that. And there are some product specifications, but all of this has to be done in the discovery, understanding what type of device we want, what type of gateway do we need, what type of use case are we looking for, what are the constraints of the physical constraints of the location, the constraints from a policy point of view, the constraints from the regulations from the country point of view. All of those have to be taken into account when you build a solution like this. And this is the last slide on this, just to let you know, like when a case comes up, what was the date of diagnosis, phone number, blah blah blah. But this information is only accessible to people who've been authorized to have access to, right? So this is not just because there is an app and you can sign in does not mean that you will have access to all sorts of data. Some of the data is sensitive, and hence it needs to be secured, and only people who've been authorized to have access to the data will have access to the data. Juan, do you want to talk about how we, embark on a journey like this, right? From an end-to-end point of view, do you want to cover or talk about the starting points, and what are the different steps we take or we believe are essential, and we've done that before for our customers, to get to that scale, to get to that production?
Sure. So, and we've been touching on these as we've been going along. So, there's a typical journey, and it really starts with the discovery phase, right? You got to understand what area, where do you think in your organization you can solve a specific business problem? And it really boils down to, can I drive new revenue, optimize an existing operation, augment an experience for either your employees, teammates, or your clients, and through that then evaluate it. So find one and make sure you find only one, and do an evaluation, create a proof of concept. And the proof of concept can be a very rapid prototyping kind of a thing, where you use commodity devices, commodity components, probably a cloud-based service if you don't have the infrastructure in place already to consume this, because that stuff, the public cloud providers have amazing technology that you can leverage to do this stuff. And you use that to validate that, hey, your proof of concept, your business idea is really being solved. And if that is true, then the very next step that you have to follow is the security of this. And make no bones, all right, and I say that's not jokingly, we are at war with nefarious actors out there, whether they're nation states or hackers that just want to crypto lock you for whatever reason. And you have to make sure that you secure this stuff, all right? So there's harden the requirements, make sure that your communication protocols, that if there's devices at the edge, that they're physically hardened themselves. And there's a number of our partners that make everything from wearables that are hardened to edge compute devices that are hardened. And they do amazing things. They have motion sensors. They have beacons that you can securely wipe them. All sorts of stuff that's built into that. There's all sorts of stuff. But the security also is part of the development journey that you have to take. If you're writing this stuff with your own development team, you have to make sure that they are building and test harnesses that are security focused right out of the gate. Just like they're testing out functionality, they have to test out their security stance and protocols. Once that's built, you got to make sure that the support and tooling and processes are in place. And finally, and once you really know how to do all of these things, that's when you can start deploying these things rapidly and at scale. And scale means different things. I mean, for Harris Teeter, scale meant 5 locations. For some of our clients, scale means tens of thousands of locations, and that just depends. But all of the previous steps need to be followed to make sure that you've achieved them. There's another view that we have for this, and Amal, maybe you can share that one. It's kind of a branching pattern, so you can start seeing, hey, there's a decision matrix that you can follow that follows the same journey to the end.
Absolutely, and if you look at this journey, and like I said, there are different paths and different options here, but it all starts from with an alignment session or a strategy workshop, and that is to do a couple of things. One is to understand the current state. What do you already have in place? Second is, what are you trying to achieve, right? And not just from a short-term perspective, from a long-term perspective, are there other use cases that you really want to bring into production? Maybe it's a year from now, maybe it's 5 years from now as the business matures and transforms. But having an understanding of where you want to go will help make these decisions. And these are critical decision points that really affect how that solution actually scales out. So once we have that align session and or the strategy workshop, and we understand what you have right now and where you want to go, you have a couple of options, right? So you can say, let me just go into the market and see what solutions already exist. Can I take a solution and then just deploy this, and is it sufficient? When you do that, there are a couple of things that you have to consider. Where is the data stored? It's your data. Where are they storing it? Do you have access to that data at any given point in time? Can you export that data? Can you integrate that data into your systems? How secure is it, right? Juan emphasized on security in the previous slide, and it's absolutely true that the security is paramount when it comes to edge solutions or cloud solutions. And an edge solution has both components in place, so you have to be super cognizant of the fact that I've got multiple endpoints and I need to manage those securely. So having, you have to answer these questions for a partner solution or a third-party solution there. And then once it's deployed, what are the options for managing those devices? Because now let's say you've got 100 locations, and each location you've got 3 of these devices deployed or 10 of these devices deployed. You need to be able to say, at any given point in time, what is the health of my deployment, of my solution? And how critical is any of those devices that are deployed? How critical is that to my business? If one of those fails, what does that mean for my business? So once you have your align session or strategy workshop, and then you can decide whether you want to plug and play a third party solution, you want a completely custom solution, you want to use maybe a SaaS kind of solution, or there are other accelerators, right? So we bring in the accelerators because we know of the common features that are required in any edge solution, and we want to be able to quickly get our customers to deploy. So look for something that has already been built out. Maybe it's 70% there, and then the 30% is where your business outcome will be built out. Your use case will be built on that framework, right? That helps you get to market, or production quickly, starts to get you the ROI sooner than later. And so you have all of these options, but if you notice, all of them end with a managed endpoint, edge endpoint monitoring. And that is because you need to be able to support those deployments across locations. And it is of super importance, because if you don't have that in place, imagine your device is going down or some edge service going down, and being able, having to send someone there like, hey, can you go fix it? It could be as simple as somebody turned it off, and now, because there was no remote monitoring, first of all, you didn't come to know that it was down for 6 hours and it could have a business impact. But then you have to send someone to fix it. I have a funny story where this was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. I did a deployment of a monitoring solution in an orchard. It was in California. We deployed, everything was working. I flew back, and after 5 days, um, we didn't see any data coming in, and it was a remote orchard, 7 square miles. Nobody was there. Guess what? I had to actually fly back 4 hours to get there, and all I had to do was turn it back on. Now, if I had remote monitoring at that point and I had out of band features deployed on that machine, I could have just seen it online, like, oh, this went down, click, done, and it's up and running, right? So uh, I cannot emphasize enough on the remote or the managed endpoint monitoring service, or anything that helps you understand what state your solution is in, is of super importance.
I got to tie into that one to some of our other sessions that are part of Accelerate here. We have one session called Extending the Data Center to the Edge that touches on exactly what Amol just talked about. And I mentioned it briefly as well. During the POC phase, it's okay to use really simple, really quick and cheap devices just to validate that stuff. But imagine that you are building something like what Amal was talking about, where you aren't building in an orchard or in a factory floor or a remote location in the tundra somewhere. As soon as you add a people component to it, that they have to go and do something, your ROI is more than likely blown. So what might have started off with $100 device as the part of the POC might become a $500 device at the deployment, because you're trying to avoid that people component of it, that out of band management that Amal touched on. So you got to make sure that you spend some time validating that as part of that secure and managed portion of it before you do the full scale deployment, because it's super easy to blow your use case with just a couple of incidents where you have to have people involved.
Absolutely. So, taking it forward, like, let's dive deeper into what an alliance session would look like, right? So this is how we do it. There are different flavors, and you might, run into different ways of doing this, and that's okay. But the core aspect of it is to get alignment. The way we do it is, you have we actually prepare before we even start an alignment session. Like, we understand, who are we talking to? We try to understand based on where that or the customer is and what market he is or what industry, understand what trends are going on, and then actually have a call with them to level set of what that alignment is going to look like, right? And then actually have the alignment session, define what the use cases are, define what the business value is, prioritize those business values as well, right? You'll see 4 or 5 things like, oh, this is important to me. I'm going to save this much money here. I'm going to make so much money there. What is really important to you? Like this or this or this, right? We need to prioritize that. And like Juan mentioned in one of the slides before, like pick one use case and then go all the way. Take it from POC, try and secure it, try to do the DevOps and MLOps, and understand what the support agreement is going to be, who's going to support it, what type of teams would you require to support this kind of solution. So that alignment and that prioritization is super important. And get into persona definition, which means who's going to use that system, right? If there are only 1 or 2 people that are going to use the system, and use the data, do you really need a full-blown application with all bells and whistles around it? Or do you just need to give them the data and they can make those decisions, right? So it also affects how you build a solution or what you're looking for in a solution. So it's really important there. And so once you go into like the alliance session, you come out of that, and after that, we kind of condense it into a nice readout where you basically, it lists out all that we've learned, the priorities, the backlog, and then what that solution would look like, right? It almost has to be a blueprint as this is what I'm going to do to get to the end state. Just to take a high level view of the same, thing, like the path that Juan talked about is, alignment. And then once your alignment is done, you plan for it, you build it. And then at that point, we you want to do this in iterations, right? So when one said pick one, that doesn't mean that you just have one use case and you pick that one, and all of the other ones are not important. They are absolutely important. So you take one, go through MVP, build, and you're like, all right, this is working. I'm starting to see my ROI here. I can see how this would scale. Now you start to iterate. Now you go back. Okay, what was the next priority use case that I had? Let me use that, build it out. Third one, build it out. So at that point, you exactly know how much you're investing. You've built your core features, you have your foundation already in place. All you're doing is adding more additional use cases that are bringing in more ROI. And that ROI could be safety, ROI could be saving money, ROI could be generating new revenue, ROI could be getting into new markets with new features, right? It could be any one of those, but it's building it incrementally helps you understand how you're going to scale it, helps you grow your team so that you can support that solution. And trust me, that solution will get complex as you add more, but that complexity is not because it is technologically complex. It is, the complexity comes from the fact that you've got multiple use cases and you've got multiple teams, and just like any other solution, you have to manage the teams, you have to manage expectations, and you have to support, have put the right support process in place to be able to sustain and grow that solution so that it impacts your business positively.
One of the other things that you can add to that, Amal, is at the very tail end of that, during the iterate, scale, and manage, is to take some time to understand the data that you're getting, to see if there is new use cases that are actually apparent to you that weren't there before. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen that pattern happen often, where we start off with a clear idea of what we want to do. We deliver that value to the client. The client's super happy with it, but then all of a sudden they realize, I have this infrastructure in place.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can use the same infrastructure to use this other use case that I had no idea that I even wanted. So I want to add value. So I'll give you an example. We had another large grocery store chain where we started with initial MVP, and it was literally just to monitor the self checkout lanes. And the initial belief is that there was theft that was happening during those checkouts. And it turned out that it was the majority of the losses were not from malicious users. It was from people that don't know how to scan their products well, and they would miss products or not get the right ones, put the wrong thing in. So it became, number one, not a theft deterrent, but education of your consumer, and build a better experience for your consumer. Well, that same infrastructure, the same components, the same GPUs, the same compute, the same networking, the same sensors, were then leveraged to, hey, let's take a look. What's the wait lines? Do we need to accelerate some other things? Do we need to provide better at this or that? And that actually started increasing the experience that the client had, which was not the initial use case. And then they started adding value to the business, and they saw significant increases in client loyalty, client happiness, all sorts of stuff that came out of it, right? So keep that in mind as you iterate. Is make sure you reevaluate some of your base assumptions as to what you're really going after, so you have an open mind. You have new tools, and make sure that you can use them to their fullest extent.
Absolutely. And it's not just infrastructure, right? It's also that, like, when you collect all of that data and you'll start to see different data sets come in, and you'll be able to correlate those data sets to drive more business insights. So, and out of those could be, you'll start to see more, maybe, features for your customers. You'll be able to say, oh, I can optimize my business this way because I didn't know that when it's summer here and it's affecting my manufacturing process there, I can do something on those lines, right? So all of that correlation comes through when you start collecting data, and collecting good clean data becomes super important. And having that stored in a structured way in one place becomes even more important, because that data set is going to drive optimizations, is going to drive more insights into your business at that point. So I think we are almost to the end of the session, and all I wanted to cover here, and Juan, please chime in, is intelligent edge is not for just one specific industry, right? Those use cases span multiple industries. You've got manufacturing, you've got retail, and in retail, it could vary from product shrinkage to inventory management to customer experience to reducing wait lines. There are numerous use cases in every industry. Every industry um, has a chance to use this solution and optimize their business, right? Same goes for hospitality as well. So, we believe that right now, with the advances in hardware and software, processes, the sensors, the marketplace for sensors, and different price points for hardware as well, with high availability and disaster recovery all built in, we are at a junction where we can really help customers. Our customers can help themselves by deploying intelligent edge solutions across different use cases, like Juan mentioned, right? It's not one hardware for one use case. That same hardware, same deployment can be used across different use cases, and it could be additive. You deploy it once, you add one use case, and it could be completely unrelated use case that you could deploy on that same infrastructure, and get benefit out of that.
It could become very transformative to the business, completely, from the data sets that you're gathering, from the use cases, and from the end user experience that you're driving through these things. I think we're at the end of our slides here, Amol.
Mm-hmm.
I would encourage the audience to go and listen to the other sessions that we have as part of this program. If you didn't get a chance to sit in on them, they're all available on demand. Please watch them, because we touch on all of the different components and the different aspects. So we have the network and the security associated with that, the data center and the edge, the deployment at scale, the ideation. I think, in fact, Amal, you have one of those other sessions as well, where you present all of that. So each one of the subjects that we covered here very lightly are covered in much, much more depth, and encourage you to watch those. And if you need our help, or we'd love to hear from you, we're here. Amal and I can be easily reached, as well as the rest of the Insight team as well. With that, I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to sit and listen to this presentation. Amal, do you have any other closing words?
Nope, just like Juan said, thank you for listening to us, and we are always here to help you in whatever form you need. Whether it's just hey, give us a call, like, hey, this is an idea, does it make sense? We'll help you go through that. Or, well, I have an idea, can you realize that idea and make sure it's deployed and supported? We can do that as well. Any which way, we are here to help you. So thank you for listening in, and do reach out.